Is your Git repository cluttered with the files you never meant to track? Wondering how to keep those passkey log files and binaries out of your commit? In today's video, we will become the cleanup crew for your Git projects. I will show you how to effortlessly rename, remove and ignore unwanted files and directories to keep your repository clean and professional. Let's dive in. Let's say we found out that one of the files in our project contains unused code and we don't need it anymore. In our project, we currently have two files, contributing and readme. Now we have decided that we no longer need the contributing file, so let's delete it. To delete the file, we will use rm command. Rm followed by space, then the file name contributing.md. Note that this rm command is standard Unix command used to remove files and directories. It's not specific to Git. Remember, all Git command will start with Git, but this one does not. Execute the command. Notice how the indicator turns yellow, showing that we have uncommitted change in our working directory. Next, let's check the Git status. Here, we can see that Git has detected the file deletion, but the changes is not staged yet. Let's check the list of files in our directory. As you can see, the contributing file is no longer in our working directory. Even though we have deleted the file from our working directory, Git still has a copy of the file from the last commit in its repository. Let me show you. In the terminal, write this command, git ls-files. These git commands lists the files that exist in the staging area. As you can see, the contributing.md file is still in the staging area. At this point, you might wondering, hey, we have not staged anything, but how come these files are still in the staging area? Well, when a file is not staged, the staging area holds the exact copy of the file as it was in the last commit. This allows us to compare the local changes with the last committed version. That means the staging area retains the last committed snapshot of the file when no new changes have been staged yet. At this point, Git is aware that we deleted the file from the working directory, but the changes has not been staged yet. To make the staging area aware of the deletion, we need to stage the change by running git add contributing.md. This may seem a bit counterintuitive. We have deleted a file, but we are using git add command. Well, in Git, the add command is used to stage any change, whether it is an addition, modification or deletion of a file. Now, let's run the git ls-files command one more time. As you can see, the contributor.md file is no longer in the staging area. If you check the Git status now, you will see that the delete operation is staged and Git is ready to commit the change. Let's commit the change. Remove unused code. Here, Git is providing the commit hash and statistics of the changes. One file has changed and that is the delete operation. So, to recap, removing a file in Git, we need to follow two steps. First, we delete the file from the working directory and then we need to stage the removal so Git is ready to commit. Since deleting a file is a common task, to make it easier, Git has a command that does both steps at once. Instead of using the regular Unix rm command, we can use git rm. Let's see how it works. Type git rm and the file name. If you want to delete multiple files, just type their name separated by spaces. You can also use patterns to remove several files that matches certain criteria. Right now, our working directory has one file, readme.md. Let's delete it. When we run this command, Git removes the file from both the working directory and the staging area in one step. Next, let's check the file list in our working directory. As you can see, the readme.md file is gone. Now, let's check the staging area. Git ls-files. The readme.md file is also removed from the staging area. Finally, let's check the status with git status. Now, we see that we have one change in the staging area, which is delete operation ready to be committed. Now that you have learned how to delete files in Git, you can easily manage your project and keep your workspace organized. Next, let's see how to rename a file. But first, let's restore our readme file. restoring a file that previously tracked by Git is easy. First, unstage the change. Git restore -- staged readme.md. Then restore the local change. Git restore readme. Let's check the file list now. Our readme file is back. You can see restoring a deleted file is easy in Git. For more detailed walkthrough on restoring files in Git, be sure to check out my separate video. Now let's run how to rename a file. We are going to rename this readme file. We can rename a file using the move command. Move readme.md. And we want our new file name is project_info.md. Again, this is a standard Unix command used to rename or move the files or directories. If you check the list of files in our working directory, you will see that readme.md has been renamed to project_info.md. Next, let's check the Git status. Here we see two unstaged changes. The first one is the deletion of readme.md, which is not staged yet. The second one is the new untracked file, project_info.md. Now let's look at the file in Git staging area. You will notice that readme.md is still exists in the staging area. Even though we deleted it, we need to stage the changes so Git can recognize that we have renamed the file. Also, Git does not track new files automatically. When you add a new file, you need to stage it so Git can start tracking it. Let's stage these changes. First, stage the deletion of readme, git add readme.md. Next, stage the new file, git add project_info.md. Now check the status again. Notice that Git is smart enough to recognize the rename operation. It shows readme.md has renamed and the new file is shown in green, meaning it's in the staging area. So, renaming a file that Git tracks involves two steps. First, renaming the file and then staging both types of changes, and addition and deletion. Since renaming is a common operation, Git has a special command for it, that is git move. Let me show you. But before that, first let me undo the rename. Unstage the changes. Git restore -- staged. I would like to unstage all changes and restore everything to the working directory. Git restore, then period. At this time, if you see the list of files in our working directory, you will see that project_info.md is still there because it was created during the rename process. Let's clean up the working directory. Git clean -ft. This will remove untracked files. If you want to know more about how to clean up your working directory and restore your files, make sure you have watched my previous video. Currently, we only have the readme file in our working directory. Now, let's use git move command to rename this file. We will rename readme.md to overview.md. Let's execute the command. Let's check the file list. You will see that readme.md has been renamed to overview.md. Now let's check the Git status. As you can see, the rename operation is already staged. The git move command renames the file and stages the change in one step. Finally, let's commit the changes. For the commit message, we say refactor readme.md file. Look at the statistics. After the commit, one file changed, that is renamed, 0 insertion since we did not add any new lines, and 0 deletion since we did not remove anything. In every project, there are files we don't need to track, like log files, compiled binaries, or configuration files. These files increase the size of the repository without offering much value. To keep the repository clean, they should be excluded from Git, preventing them from being pushed to remote repositories or shared with others. A quick reminder. You will notice that I am using command line throughout this tutorial. I believe it's essential to become familiar with the command line because it's often the quickest way to perform tasks. Plus, there are situations like working on remote servers where the command line is the only available option. So, let's get comfortable with it together. Now, back to the project. Let's say we have a configuration file that holds sensitive information. Let's create this file. I am currently in my project directory. Here, for creating this new file, I am going to use touch command. This command creates new empty file. Let's say our file name is config.txt. This file may contain sensitive informations like passwords, server credentials, and database information. Now check the Git status. This command shows the current state of our working directory and staging area. You can see that config.txt is listed as an untracked file, which means Git knows the file exists but is not tracking any changes to it yet. Git does not track new files automatically. This helps prevent accidentally adding files to the Git repository that you don't mean to include. Now, we don't want to share our sensitive data, so we want Git to ignore this configuration file. Tell Git to ignore this file. We need to create a special file named .gitignore. Git uses this file to know which files or folders to ignore. It has no name, only the extension. The dot at the beginning makes it a hidden file on systems like Mac OS or Linux. We need to place it at the root of the project so that it can be applied to all the files and subdirectories of the project. Now we need to add config.txt to this .gitignore file. For this, I am using echo command. This is standard Unix command to write content to a file. We want to write config.txt. Then I am using > operator, which means append, and I want to append it to the Gitignore file. This > sign altogether is called append redirection operator. In the context of the shell command like this terminal or command line, it appends the output to the end of the file without overwriting the existing content. Let's verify it. Opening the file in Visual Studio Code. You can see the config.txt is added in this file. Now back to the terminal. Let's check the Git status again. Now you'll notice that config.txt no longer appears in the list of untracked files. Git is ignoring it based on the rules in Gitignore. However, Gitignore itself is untracked at this point. We need to add this file to the repository so that Git knows that it needs to track this Gitignore file. Use the git add command. Git add.gitignore. Now commit the change with a message describing what you have done. Add gitignore to ignore git config.txt. Now any modification or change of this config.txt file will be ignored by Git. Let me show you. Let's add some content to our file. Echo. Then let's say we want to add password to our config file. Check Git status one more time. You can see our directory is clean. Git is ignoring this file. You can also ignore the full directory or provide a pattern to ignore the file that matches that pattern. Let's say we have a log directory where log files are saved. Creating a logs directory using the mkdir command. Within this directory, let's create a simple log file. Again, check the Git status. You can see that logs directory is listed as untracked. To ignore the entire log directory, let's add this to gitignore. Echo logs / then > sign, and we want to append it in gitignore. This appends logs to our gitignore file, telling Git to ignore everything inside the logs directory. Check the Git status one more time. Now logs and its contents are no longer listed in the untracked files. Now commit the updated gitignore file. Git add gitignore. Now commit. Message: ignore logs directory. Now if you add any new file inside this log directory or update the existing log file, Git will going to ignore that. Let's say another log file is generated from our project. Here you see our indicator is still green, meaning our directory is clean. Let's verify it. Git status. You see we have nothing to stage or commit. Here one more thing. The gitignore file only works for untracked files. That means files that have not been staged or committed before. If you have already committed a file or directory to your repository and then decide to ignore it, adding to gitignore won't have any effect. Let me show you. Let's say our project generates binary files inside bin directory. Let's create a new bin directory. Inside this directory, let's say we have a binary file generated. For example, let's say file1.bin. Check the Git status. Here we have an untracked directory. Let's commit this bin directory. Git add bin / git commit -m add binary files. Now let's try to ignore this bin directory. So append this bin directory to our gitignore file. Echo bin, append it to Gitignore, and commit the updated Gitignore. Add bin directory to Gitignore. Now let's say we have compiled our project and our generated binary file is modified. Add some text to file 1, echo newly generated content, append to file1.bin. Now check the git status. You will notice that even though we have added the bin directory to Gitignore, but files within bin still show up as modified or tracked files. This is because Gitignore only affects untracked files. Since this file is already tracked, Git continues to monitor changes to them. If you check the list of files in the staging area, git ls-files, you see we have bin directory in our staging area. So we need to remove it from here in order to ignore it. This is because Gitignore only affects untracked files. Since this file is already tracked, Git continues to monitor changes to them. So we need to remove it from here in order to ignore it. How? We can use git rm. With this command, we can remove the file from the working directory as well as the staging area. But there is a problem. We need those binary files because that's how we launch our application. We need to remove them only from the staging area or repository while keeping them on our local file system. So how we can remove it from the staging area? Let's ask Git for help. Git rm. After this, add -h for quick help. So we use git rm. Here is one of the options, --cached. With this option, we can remove stuff only from the index. The index is the alternative term for the staging area. If you follow the Git documentation, you will find the term index is used instead of staging area. This is the option that we want. We want to remove the files only from the staging area or index. So we type git rm -cached, then bin /. Let's execute the command. Now we have a fatal error. Not removing bin recursively without r. What is happening here? Let's ask for help again. Git rm -cached -h. Here we have this -r. This allows recursive removal. So what does it mean? This bin is a directory and we have files in it. So we need to recursively remove all of them. So we need to use -r flag. So we type git rm -cached -r, that bin /. Now this entire directory is removed from the staging area. Let's verify this. Git ls-files. See, our bin is no longer in the staging area. Check our working directory. This bin directory exists in our working directory. Now run git status. We have one changes that is ready to be committed. This directory has been deleted from the staging area. So let's commit the change. Git commit. Let's say the commit message is stop tracking bin directory. Now let's echo another line to the file1.bin. Check the git status again. You see our working directory is still clean. And that's how you can keep your Git repository clean by efficiently removing and ignoring unnecessary files and directories. Till now, we have made several commits, but where are they? We are saying that Git is our project's time machine. But how we can go back to the previous version? How to trace every change, revisit the past versions, or recover a file you accidentally deleted or want to bring back after you deleted it? How to navigate through your commits? We'll learn that next. We will explore how to view your commit logs, dive into specific snapshots, and even restore files to earlier versions. It's like having a time machine for your code. Just click on the video that appears on the right to continue your Git learning journey. Thank you for joining me today. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. See you there.